I think it would be pretty uncontroversial to say that more people know the advantages of riding a bike for transport than are actually doing it. I mean, we all know that the exercise is good for you. We all know that being out in the fresh air is good for you. We all know that riding a bike is way cheaper than the alternatives. And then I'm sure we've all heard about the benefits to society as a whole as well. A lower burden on the healthcare system from all the exercise and the reduction in car crashes. Less money being lost by local governments on heaps of surface parking, less damage to roads because bikes are so much lighter than cars, less CO2 emissions, less noise pollution, safer roads, the list goes on. So why then do only 1.2% of Australians actually commute by bike? This is a pretty shockingly low number. A lot of it comes down to bad infrastructure and bad land use, putting unnecessary obstacles in people's way. But a lot also comes down to the fact that this has been going on for so long that even when there are changes, and even that we're now realizing that the car might not be the best form of transport, we're so used to it that bike commuting is becoming a bit of a lost art. I've known plenty of people who want to start getting around by bike, but they're not quite sure how to go about doing it, and they have questions and worries. And look, if that's you, worry and question no more, because I will go through the most common things I've heard one by one all the way through the video, and I will deal with them. In part 1 of this video, we're going to look at weather, hills, parking, and theft. In part 2, we'll look at gear, mixing with cars, choosing a route, and the cognitive bias that might be keeping us driving. Welcome to Footpaths and Corner Stores. My real full name is Chris Topher. Make sure to subscribe to learn one lost art. And that's per video, it's a really good deal. Weather, in my opinion, is actually the simplest problem to solve, but it's one that non-bikers actually seem to have a pretty difficult time understanding. I think that what we forget, because we spend so much time indoors, are all a little bit tougher than maybe we give ourselves credit for. Usually in rain, a simple rain jacket works fine. In torrential rain, maybe a pair of ski pants and a spare pair of socks if the rain jacket doesn't cover your legs and feet. But other than that, I personally haven't felt the need to use one, but I have heard good things about the style of rain jacket that's kind of like a cloak and covers much more of your body, including your legs, like a clever hood type thing. Really, the most annoying thing about riding in the rain is if you have to park your bike outdoors somewhere without shelter and then the seat gets wet. Now, the simple way to deal with this is you just keep a gym towel in your pannier. And now this may surprise a lot of people, in fact it surprised me. There are actually advantages to riding in the rain compared to driving as well. One thing is that it's actually a kind of humbling experience being out there in the elements. You're more in touch with the weather, you notice it, you feel a little bit more, part of the natural world, which is something that's very difficult to describe, but I guarantee if you start riding and you do so in a range of weather, you will notice yourself noticing the weather more. This is even more pronounced in pretty spectacular weather events. I'll give you an example. Once I was riding back from Canberra to Queanbeyan. It's maybe a 12 or 13 kilometer ride. The whole ride was during this awesome thunderstorm. It was fantastic. Luckily, I was on a shared path, completely separated from the road pretty much the whole way, so I didn't have to worry about cars and the low visibility of drivers. And I should add that you don't lose as much visibility on a bike that you would in a car, so that's another advantage. But being able to focus on the awesome lightning and being properly surrounded by that thunder, every sense was fully alert to the storm. The wind buffeting me, the rain chilling my skin, the thunder all around me. It was just really cool. All right, so we've dealt with the rain. What about the cold? Here is a photo of my dad and I just before we went on his first work commute by bike. In a few decades. We left on a pretty chilly morning. I think it was even the coldest morning of that winter. It was either -6 or -7. It was very frosty. We left around 6 a.m, so well before sunrise. And you can see we had a lot of gear going on. So I'll go through some of that in a bit more detail. For gloves, I would recommend snow gloves, something that'll really keep off the chill from the wind, because your hands are out in front of you. They need the most protection from that cold, cold air. Your feet are similarly exposed to your hands, so this is a mistake that we both made on that bike trip. We both wore mesh runners. Bad idea. Very numb toes, wearing closed shoes and thick socks. A beanie and a scarf are always good ideas as well. Just put that beanie on underneath the helmet. It usually fits fine. And if you do all of that, you will be more than fine. In fact, you know what? The exercise may even warm you up quicker than your AC can boot up in your car. You also don't have to bother with defrosting your windscreen if you ride your bike in the cold. So in some ways, it's actually easier than driving. Summer heat. Now, that one is, in my opinion, the most difficult to deal with, unless you have an e-bike. Then the e-bike brings it to a similar level of physical exertion to walking if you put up the pedal assist to the higher levels, which, to be honest, can be pretty unpleasant on a 40-degree humid day anyway. But you know what? When you're riding a bike, you have free wind cooling. So it's kind of like having a fan in front of you going in your face the whole time. So it's, not so bad. On an acoustic bike, on a hot day, you're gonna sweat. That's just the fact of it. Now, for a few years before I got an e-bike, I was commuting during the summer with an acoustic bike, not just anywhere, up and down Anzac Bridge. So that was pretty strenuous. But what I would do is, if I was going to the office, I'd shower when I got there. There were showering facilities. Most people have a shower in the morning anyway. Just change it so it's done at work. If there's no shower where you work, have a look around at nearby pools or beaches or anything like that. I had an internship once in Ramsgate and there weren't any showers at the office, but I was lucky enough to be working right near a beach where there were showers, so I just showered at the beach. My biggest piece of advice though for avoiding sweat, and this is e-bike or no, do not wear a backpack. You wear a backpack, you are gonna get a dark rectangle right on your back. Hills. I have heard hills talked about less as a reason for not riding a bike and more as a reason for someone who's never tried riding a bike to argue against a bike lane being put in. Generally, hills are not a huge deal. They are not a worry at all on an e-bike, and on an acoustic bike, you know what? You might be surprised about how quickly you get fit as you go up and down those hills. And to be honest, there's absolutely no shame in just getting off your bike and walking it up a big hill.
I decided I was going to ride up this steep hill, carrying you with me.
Who said that you could decide that?
Now we get to the things that can actually be obstacles in a way that weather and hills really just aren't. We're going to start with parking your bike out and about. This is the thing I got the most comments about by far when I asked people on my community page what questions they had about bike commuting. Now, a lot of what you do with parking your bike outside will depend on the area that you're leaving it. In Sydney, and I assume other capital cities, many office buildings will have their own secure card access bike parking facilities. Unfortunately, I didn't know this when I first started riding my bike to work, and I locked up my bike to a street sign out the front of the office building in the Sydney CBD that I worked at. Once I left my bike locked up to that street sign overnight, and unfortunately the next morning I arrived at work to find that it had been stolen. I don't know what I was expecting, I don't know why I did it. I guess I just didn't have the experience to know that that kind of thing happened. I also didn't have the experience to think to ask about a secure bike parking facility in the office building, because it did have one, and if I had known about it, my bike would not have been stolen. I went up there and talked to my colleagues who didn't even ride their bikes to work. I was like, oh, my bike got stolen, complaining about it. And they were like, oh, it would have had to be someone in this building. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, like they would have had to have the card to tap into the secure facility. And I was like, there's a secure bike parking facility? So, if you start a new job, ask around. That's, when people in a job interview are like, what questions do you have for us? I'm always like, where's your bike parking? I don't know if that's good as far as getting a job, but it's good as far as knowing where to park your bike. And look, even if you don't have a purpose-built bike parking facility at your workplace, most places will have staff rooms or some kind of secure little used room that you can tuck your bike away in. For parking at a train station, if you're doing the old park and ride with your bike, which is a great way to commute if you live in a city with good enough train services, I would definitely recommend bike sheds over leaving it on a regular bike rack outside the train station. It's so much more secure. Even if that means riding a couple more minutes to get to a train station with a bike shed, I think that would be the way to go. These aren't perfect though. I have actually had my bike seat stolen from the Opal bike shed in Redfern, and even though it says CCTV cameras nearby on the sign on the door of the bike shed, the CCTV cameras are like far away enough that they can't even see the entrance of the bike shed, let alone inside it. It's actually really misleading. So make sure that you can actually sight a security camera in the bike shed if you're worried about people stealing things still. I can say pretty happily that there are CCTV cameras in every Sydney Metro bike shed that I've been in. Those bike sheds are just a league above everything else that Sydney has. They are fantastic park and ride facilities. Check out my Metro video if you want to learn more about those. If you're just leaving your bike for a few hours or less during the day, all you've got to do really is choose a busy location. The busier the area, the safer your bike will likely be. This might seem counterintuitive, especially for places where there's a bit more crime than Australia. For example, I've seen videos of people in a London angle grinding a bike lock to steal the bike in a busy area and no one's done anything. But I think Australia has a different culture. Usually people are too afraid to conspicuously steal a bike in a public area. The bike location that people were focused on when they were asking the question was out and about. But counterintuitively, the place that your bike is most likely to get stolen is at home. See, more than half of all bike thefts happen in the owner's home. This really checks out with my experiences. I mean, aside from the bike that was stolen from outside my office, all of the bikes that I've had stolen have been stolen from my home. The bike that I got after the one I locked up out the front of the office was stolen from my back shed when I lived in a share house in Lewisham. I didn't lock it up in the shed wasn't locked, but I was like, oh, surely it'll be fine, you know, it's in the backyard, who's gonna walk into the backyard and steal stuff when there's always someone home in the share house, you know? But lo and behold, one night somebody decided to mosey on in, steal all of the washing off the washing line, take my bike out of the shed, and they got away with it. The next bike I had stolen was also from my home. This was my first e-bike. Unfortunately, the apartment building I was living in at the time had no bike parking facilities at all, not even a shed. It just had a carport. And what I did is I got a cable lock, a thick cable lock, but still a cable lock, put it around one of the columns of the carport, locked it, and then used a D-lock to lock my bike to the cable lock. I wish I had known back then how terrible an idea this was. Cable locks are incredibly easy to cut through, and that's exactly what happened. I woke up one morning to find the cable lock cut, my bike stolen, and my partner's older rusty bike left there. So I guess having a cheap bike is also a good theft deterrent too. One place that I've never had a bike stolen from is a locked garage, but not everybody has access to that, unfortunately. Now, I touched on this when I mentioned that cable locks are bad and you should not buy them, but I'm going to go in depth a little more with buying the right lock for your bike. First rule is do not get a cable lock. They suck, they're terrible, they're really easy to cut. Don't get one. Second lesson to learn is that locks are graded with a security system done by an independent company. In fact, there are two grading systems that are common in Australia. One goes from 1 to 15, the other goes from bronze to silver to gold. Especially if you have an e-bike or a more expensive bike, get a lock rated 10 or above or gold and above. These will set you back a little bit more. Normally I wouldn't spend any less than $70 on a lock, but it is very worth it. Ensure you lock up your wheels and your frame where possible so that the wheels don't get nicked. And I usually lock my helmet. I pass my lock through the little triangle of the strap and just lock it up there. Saves me having to carry it around. Now, if your bike does get stolen, there is some gear that will help you recover it as well. Based on my knowledge and the actual practical experiences of a friend of mine, having a tracker on your bike can really, really help. If you have Apple, probably go with an AirTag. If you have an Android phone, probably go with a Tile. Tile is the one I've got. It's the one that my friend has got. And when my friend's bike got stolen from the supposedly secure shared carport of where she lives, she managed to actually use the tile to track it down to a pretty sketchy share house in Summer Hill. She staked out the house until she managed to convince the cops to come along and help, but she did end up getting her bike back, and she wouldn't have got it back without her tile. You can also register your bike's serial number to Bike Vault. This will help you find it if it turns up on the second-hand market. I really hope these tips have been helpful, and I hope you are now ready to face weather, hills, bike thieves, whatever may come your way as you switch your main mode of transportation to a bike, or even just supplement your main mode of transportation with a bike. But there are still plenty more questions to address, so make sure to subscribe so that you get notified of the next video, which will be part 2 of this, where I discuss all the gear that you'll need. I'll talk about the safest way to find a route, how to mix with cars, and the cognitive bias that might be keeping you driving. If you do have any more questions about bike commuting, or if you have any experiences that you want to share, feel free to leave a comment so that we can all help each other out. I'm very keen to hear about everyone else's experiences with the things that they've overcome in their bike commuting journey, both literally and figuratively. And with that, I will see you in the next video.